Hey, what's up, guys? This is Mike, and I'm bringing you the episode number 2 of the Talk of Horror podcast. Tonight, my guest is Galaxia Ciandre. Did I say that right?
Yes, you
Okay,
did.
I was so afraid I was going to butcher your name, and so Galaxia is one of my fellow admins in the morgue. I'm sure you guys all know her because she's always posting when she's not busy. One of the things I love about Galaxia is she helps with animals, and so if you're friends with her on Facebook or whatever, I'm sure you see pictures of her and cats and stuff all the time, and I think that's awesome. But
Thank
Galaxia,
you.
you're welcome. I admire that. I was just telling her how my daughter is crazy about animals, and so they would get along well. But the main thing I like about Galaxia is she, like myself, is a huge horror fan, and obviously you guys are too if you're listening to this. But I reached out to her to be a guest on this episode, and I asked her to pick a movie, and she picked the most random movie. Believe it or not, I've never even heard of this movie, and so she suggested that I watch it before the podcast, which was a great suggestion. So I actually just finished this movie about 15-20 minutes ago, and the movie is called Rawhead Rex. Excuse me. I live in the South, so everything's rawhide, but no, it's
Right.
Rawhead Rex, and oh my God, I don't even know where to begin. I'm just going to give a little bit of a storyline, and then I'm going to let Galaxia talk
Yep.
about it and why she loves it and why she chose this movie. But basically, what it is there's this guy, and correct me if I'm wrong with any of this, but there's this guy
Uh-huh.
and his wife and his 2 kids. They travel to Ireland. They're American. They go to Ireland, and from what I got, his wife is of Irish heritage. And anyway, the one thing that I noticed right off the bat, the opening scene of the movie, I absolutely loved it. Before you even saw any of the actors or anything, it reminded me so much of George Romero's original Night of the Living Dead, as well
Living
as
Dead,
yeah,
yeah.
as well as Tom Savini's 1990 remake of Night of the Living Dead, because you just see this car driving in the countryside, and it's so much. I don't think they were copying it by any means. That's not what I'm insinuating, but it just reminded me of that, and so it sucked me in right away just because of that. So anyway, this guy is and his wife and 2 kids are over there, and he's doing some research for something, and they go to this church, and there's a farmer, and there's some kind of stone on his property. He's trying to remove the stone, and when they do, they unleash this demon, and it just goes crazy from there. It's got, some of the wackiest but cool 80s special effects, 1980s special effects I've ever seen. This movie's from 1986, if I'm correct on that. That's what it
Mm-hmm.
said. That's what it said
Yep.
on the YouTube video where I watched it. But
Yep.
anyway,
86 is correct.
okay, cool. So I was 10 years old when this movie came out, and I was telling Galaxia earlier, I watched horror movies all the time when I was a kid. Somehow this movie slipped under the radar. I'd never heard of it, and I'm so glad that she brought this movie up and suggested it for the topic of this episode of the podcast. So I'm going to turn it over to Galaxia now, and why in the world did you choose this movie? And I just want to know, when was the first time you saw it, or were you a kid? What turned you on to this movie and made you choose it?
Okay, so what made me choose the movie for tonight, it's so random. A few days ago, Mondo Tees, they put out amazing posters every once in a while.
Right.
And they actually had a poster for Nightbreed.
Love that
which
movie.
is another movie that I love.
Yeah, awesome movie. Very underrated.
And I went ahead and I bought the poster, and then when you were asking me, hey, pick a movie, and I'm just like, So it was actually between Nightbreed and Rawhead Rex. And I believe Rawhead Rex is more of an underrated movie than Nightbreed.
Absolutely.
You mentioned Nightbreed. I would say maybe 90% of the horror community would know about Nightbreed. You mentioned Rawhead Rex, and it's like 40% of the community would be like, yeah, it's an awesome movie, and like the other 60 is just like, what?
Right, because like I said, I'd never heard of it until you mentioned it.
Yeah, and it's also based on a short story by Clive Barker.
Okay, I saw his name in the credits, or in the beginning credits.
So it's really funny. It's a funny story. Clive Barker really hated the movie, so it's kind of like a whole like Stephen King, The Shining type deal, where Stephen King hated the original Shining by Kubrick, but he loved the made-for-TV movie.
Right.
Clive Barker hated. He just did not like the way the creature was actually shown in the movie. In the book, he describes this creature, which is like totally different. But I saw the movie first before I read the book. So it took me maybe 3 watches to actually really, really like this movie.
Right.
First time I watched it was maybe, I would say, about 7 years ago.
Okay, so it hasn't been that long then. So
Yeah.
it's not something you saw as a child.
No, it was about 7 years ago. I never really knew about the movie until I really started to get into Clive Barker. And like I said, before I read Books of Blood, I was like, okay, let's see what else is out there. There was Hellraiser, there was Nightbreed, Candyman. I'm like, oh, let me check out Rawhead Rex.
Well, going to what you were just saying about the creature, the first time I saw it, when I was watching it a little bit ago, to me, it just reminded me of a really pissed off Sasquatch. Or like a fucking pissed off Harry and the Hendersons. But don't let don't let that turn you away from the movie.
Face, though. No, not at all. I think I was like, and that's the other thing I love about it too, is just like real creature effects, like creature feature type movies, like Pumpkinhead. And I love those type of movies.
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
It's just no CGI. It's a guy in a freaking costume.
And I wish they would do.
Rampant.
I wish they would do more of that. Actually, William Butler, who was in Tom Savini's remake of Night of the Living Dead, he's been in Friday the 13th, Part 7, and a few other movies, Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 3. He's actually working on a children's movie right now, and he was just talking about that the other day, about instead of doing all the special effects, like they're bringing, as he put it, puppets back. And that's one of the things I love about these old movies like this, and I think that's one of the reasons I enjoyed it so much, because nowadays they just CGI the shit out of everything, and I don't like that.
It's not fun.
No, it just I don't know. To me, it takes some of the scare factor away. And another thing I was going to bring up about this movie, and we talked about it before we came on here, if you guys have ever watched Army of Darkness, you know that it has some of the best one-liners you've ever heard.
Oh, yeah.
This movie is second only to Army of Darkness for one-liners. I was telling Galaxy a little bit ago, there's a part where one of the, I'm going to say sheriff's deputy, because that's what we call him here in the U.S., but this is obviously taking place in Ireland. But one of the detectives helpers, or whatever they refer to it over there, he asked the main character in the movie, the man from America, I can't remember his name, but he asked him, he goes, would you like a cup of tea? And he tells him, he goes, go fuck yourself. And he goes, I try not to do that, or something along those lines. And then there's another part towards the end where he's holding up this stone and he's like, come on, sweetheart, or something like that. And I just about pissed my pants, because it just was so crazy. Another thing I liked, going back to what you were just talking about with the CGI and everything, I love the death scenes in this movie. They kept it simple.
Were cool, yeah.
They kept it simple, and they didn't go overboard. But there was one part in particular, my favorite part of the movie. I have two favorite parts, and then I'm going to ask you what your favorite parts are, because I'm very curious to know. Number one, as a toy collector, there's this little boy in the movie, probably about 10 years old, named Ian, I believe was his name, and he has this wind-up electric robot or whatever, and
the kid in the trailer.
The kid in the trailer, yeah. And not the trailer of the movie, an actual trailer that they were staying in, just not to confuse anybody. Yes, the trailer in the movie. He has this robot, and I guess it's his sister or something. Anyway, her boyfriend grabs it and takes it outside, and they lock the kid in the trailer, and then Rawhead Rex, not to be confused with Rawhide Rex, he smashes the robot, and the kid he gets out of the trailer and sees the robot smashed, and he's just pissed off, and so he goes after, I don't want to ruin the movie, but anyway, that cracked me up. And the second part has to do with some of the same characters. I don't know if it was his sister and her boyfriend, or if that was his brother, or what, but they're holding hands, and Rawhead Rex attacks them, and she comes running back to the trailer park, telling people that, her boyfriend's been killed or whatever. And then she fucking looks down at her hand, and his fucking hand has been severed, and she's still holding his hand the whole time she ran back to the trailer park. And that was hands down my favorite part of the movie. So
that was one of my favorites too.
Oh, it was great. Yeah. I did not, it totally caught me off guard. So other than that scene, what is your favorite part of the movie?
There was that one, and there was two more. The other one was another death scene where Rawhead just goes crazy on the trailer park and just kind of starts killing everybody.
Right.
And there was this one where there was this girl standing by the window,
I
know where you're going. Through the window and just grabs her and pulls her through the window, and it's like boobs. And it's literally the only boob shot in the whole movie.
Yeah, her freaking boobs just come popping out,
And out of nowhere, and he just throws her, and it's more boobs. And for a while, it's the whole scene is nothing but boobs for 5 minutes.
Right.
And it's this is great. This is the only boob scene you'll ever see in the whole movie. And
that that was on purpose. I was just sitting there when I watched that scene. I was like, I want to know who the writer was, or who was in the production crew, or the director, or whoever was like, okay, when we pull this bitch through the window, make sure to get a nice clean shot of her boobs, because that's exactly what happened. And it was great because it was funny, but at the same time it kind of ruined the kill shot, because but back in that day, it's always been that way in the modern horror era from the 70s till now. You have to have a boob shot, or you just basically can't have a horror movie. So what's some of your other favorite scenes?
The other one was where, so you know how there was the priest, and then I guess it was a guy who was the reverend or something, and I guess the other guy was the priest, the one who went crazy.
Right. That
was under. So when I think Declan was the crazy guy. So the reverend, when he goes back to the church, and Declan is under submission for Rawhead, and the reverend is oh, God would instill blah 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 upon you, and Declan turns around and he's he's really sinister. He's just there is no God, and he just lets out this evil laugh, one of the best evil laughs I've ever heard in a horror movie. He's there is no God, ha 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 ha.
Yeah,
here's God. It was the perfect line ever.
Yeah, he actually referred to Rawhead Rex as God. And and basically I forgot what he was talking to his the fellow reverend or whatever, or priest, whatever you want to call it, and I forgot the line he used, but he was basically telling him, hey, or the good reverend, the good priest was telling the other priest, like you serve God or whatever, and he referred to him as like a silly. I don't remember the word he used. Something to do with like a farmer, like a sheep farmer or something.
Yeah.
I can't remember. But it really got dark there for a minute. I mean, they were really going totally antichrist there in the last 15 minutes of the movie. But the ending was hilarious to me because the lady from America, she picks up this stone and...
So it's like, my whole deal with that part is like, how did she know to pick this stone up?
Exactly. She just looked down. They're in a cemetery next to the church, and Rawhead Rex is about to kill her husband, and she just looks over and sees this stone that he had pulled out of this altar earlier, because if you watch the movie, I don't want to spoil the movie and give too much away, but if you watch the movie, you find out that Rawhead Rex has been there before, and he's back, and blah, blah, blah. But she picks up this rock and holds it over her head, and then like an angel comes out of her. It's the craziest, cheesiest special effects I've ever seen. And then another great one-liner is, her husband was almost killed with this crazy, killer Sasquatch, for lack of a better term. And then all of a sudden he just kind of has this smirky grin, and he's like, oh, so it had to be a woman. Because, yeah, so he held the rock and nothing happened, and then his wife just shows up out of nowhere and picks it up, and then he's like, oh, so it has to be a woman. And, a lot of people are going to think that's cheesy. I think that's what made this movie.
That's what makes the movie, it really does. And the other thing that I really like about the movie, too, is like, that I like about mostly horror movies is that it's folklore.
Right,
and
absolutely.
You don't get a lot of horror movies that's quote-unquote based on folklore. Even though, it's not real folklore for what in Ireland, but, it's a story
they made
around the folklore from Ireland, and I love horror movies like that, and that's what kind of makes me really like Rawhead.
Yeah, it had, going back to something that you mentioned earlier as far as other movies go, it really reminded me a lot of the story and the narrative of Pumpkinhead. But it's a totally different movie. I'm not comparing it to Pumpkinhead in that way, but as far as the folklore,
there,
absolutely.
Exactly.
And it was just and they weren't even afraid to kill a kid in this movie. I'm not going to tell you which kid, but they went there. And you watch Friday the 13th and stuff like that. Jason never killed a kid, but they went there in this movie. No, it wasn't a young kid, but under 10.
I wanted to mention that it was probably one thing that I really dislike, but I know it's a movie, is that when they actually kill off a child in a movie, and especially if the child is the main actor's child.
Right.
Because it's like, you feel it more, you feel the pain and the hatred for that monster or the killer that actually did the killing.
Right.
But I do have to say, it's a little funny in a way in this movie, because when Daddy sees it happening, he's and he's behind a gate, and he's just literally watching his child get killed. And just, the look on his face, it's like, oh, no,
Yeah,
I kind of laughed at that, not meaning to sound gruesome, but it was kind of funny.
I was going to bring that point up because the one thing, I don't like to nitpick movies, but I always find something in every movie, even if it's a movie that I absolutely love, there's always something. And the thing that bothered me is after his son died, you didn't really see the grief on his or his wife's face, and his daughter, which is way younger than his son, she pretty much just stays asleep in her mom's lap, and I just didn't feel that emotional grief from him. He was just pissed off and was more concerned about killing this monster than he was the fact that his son has just been murdered. But to give credit where credit is due, you know, they show the boy get killed, but they don't go into like a gruesome scene. You know he's dead, but
Yeah.
they
They
don't
don't
kill him off.
show
Right. They
him.
don't really
Yeah.
show him dying, but you know he's dead. So for anybody listening that's like, oh shit, I can't watch this movie because they're killing a kid, they don't actually show it. To be honest with you, when I just watched it a little bit ago, I thought maybe he just kidnapped the kid, and it wasn't until they were back at the police station when he said, "We will find the police chief or commissioner, whatever."
Yeah.
You know, said,
It just
"We'll
shows you.
we'll."
Yeah, because it just shows Rawhead just walking into the woods with the body, but you don't know if he's alive or not.
Right, and
You
and
know.
he said, you know, he promised the dad, he's like, we will find the guy that killed your son. And even when he said that, I'm like, well, how do you know he's dead? And then I realized what they had done. They didn't want to show, because especially back in 1986, I think that would have been a real controversy.
Oh,
But at the same
definitely.
time, it probably would have given the movie more publicity and notoriety if they had shown the death scene of the kid, because there would have been a bunch of pissed off, angry parents talking about it. But I'm
That's
glad
very
they did
true.
it. Yeah, you know. So you know, coming from a filmmaker point of view, because you know I used to do, you know, movies before my health went to shit. But you know, from that point of view, it would have been cool to see. But I also, you know, have to give credit that they respected, you know, the thoughts of people with children, because now that I'm a dad, you know,
You
I have a
start to
hard
feel a lot
time.
of heart,
Yeah, I have a
definitely.
hard time watching movies, especially a movie like Pet Cemetery, where the little, you know, because that's like my daughter's age.
Jake.
So I have a hard time, you know, if I watch those movies, I have to fast forward through that shit. But wow, what a trip, man! I am so glad that you recommended this movie. And anybody that's listening, if you have not seen Rawhead Rex, you don't even have to spend money to watch it. You can go to YouTube, type in Rawhead Rex, and the full movie, uncut, commercial free, and really good quality, is on YouTube, and you've got to check it out. It's
Yeah, I'm
just,
really surprised you've never seen it. It's
I
like,
am
what?
too. I'm kind of
Yeah.
disappointed. I'm disappointed in myself, because I pride myself on knowing all about these, you know, B movies and lesser known movies. And if you had not mentioned this, I don't know if I would have ever seen this movie. And so for that, I just want to say, and I mean this as cheesy as it sounds, I am very grateful to you for bringing this movie to my attention, because I needed
Yay.
to
No,
watch that. And you know, and it's so much better
just,
than talking about, you know, Freddy or Jason or Michael. As much as I love those three
yeah, that's
characters,
the other thing, too. You know, you grew up in the 80s, and it's like, you know, just the slasher guys. Like you said, you know, the main guys,
right?
Freddy, Michael, et cetera, et cetera. Leatherface, right? But it's like, a lot of people don't really talk about the creature features, feature guys like Pumpkinhead and Rawhead Rex. Who else am I missing? There's a couple of others out there I can't even think about right now.
Yeah,
And,
they
you
don't get
know,
enough credit. They sure don't.
exactly, they don't. And it's, you know, you bring up these B movies to people, and not to like come down on anyone. Whoever loves horror, but when you start talking about these B movies, and there's a lot of quote unquote horror fanatics that are just like brand new to the scene in a way, and they look at you like, who? Like, what's a B movie? Why would you watch a B movie? You know, and these are the people that kind of just watch like the movies that come out in theaters, you know, like blockbuster horror movies. And I feel like we as a community have to like bring those newbies into like down into the gutter, you know.
No, I
To like
agree,
show them the B movies.
and what a gutter it is, you know, but in a good way. I agree. Some of my favorite, I would say the majority of my favorite horror movies were straight to VHS back in the day, or straight to DVD nowadays. There's so
Or
many.
even like now, it's like straight to VOD. You
Right?
know, it's
Yeah.
like skip the theater.
Yeah, and some of those are great, and you know, I keep bringing it up in you know, podcasts and conversations and stuff, but I cannot wait until October 19th for Halloween. I am just so stoked for that. And that's...
Personally, I can't wait for it either.
Yeah.
Knowing that's, 40 years later?
40 years later, they are...
original cast, it's just...
It's going to be great.
Amazing.
It's going to be great. Kadri, one of our fellow admins, him and I are going to be doing the next podcast, and the whole podcast is going to be about Halloween. I'll warn you guys ahead of time. There will be foul language, arguments, you name it, all in good fun. All in good fun. Because if you know Kadri at all, he's going to throw his 2 cents in, and I am such a huge Michael Myers fan. That is going to be something that you don't want to miss, because that's going to be a circus for sure. But is there anything else you want to add about this movie, or any other movies that B movies that you would like to recommend?
If you read Clive Barker and you've read his books, don't compare the movie to the book. Definitely don't compare the movie to the book. There's still some notes from the book in the movie itself, but a lot of people will probably go in, agreeing with Clive. The beast was not what he was supposed to be, blah, 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 but the story is still there. Just look past the book. The book, don't get me wrong, is amazing, but the movie on its own it's fucking great.
Absolutely.
Other movies, it's really good. Like, again, if you haven't seen it, just give it a watch. It's definitely one of the best 80s B movies out there.
Oh, I give it an A. I really do. And one of the things that I liked about watching this movie that I don't always get with other movies is when you suggested this movie to me for this podcast and for me to watch it, you didn't tell me anything about it, so I went into it with no expectations. And I think that's a lot of the reasons that people don't like movies nowadays, or even word of mouth about older movies.
Exactly.
If you go in with high expectations and it's not what you think, you're let down. If you go in with low expectations and it's better than you think, then that's all good. But I like going into a movie with no expectations, and that's what I did with this one, and I think that's why I enjoyed it so much. Because if I would have...
That's the way I am too. Just going blind. That's the way to watch a movie.
Absolutely.
Just going blind. Like, even with movies coming out now, I'll know who, the main actor is, but other than that, I'll probably just watch, the first trailer. No more trailers. I don't want to look into the movie. I don't want to know what the movie's about, and I just go in blind.
No, I think that's some of the best advice you could give, any movie goer, but especially in the horror community. Just go into it blind, with an open mind, and remember why you're there to see it, whether it's in your house, in the theater, in your car, on your phone, whatever. Remember, you're there to be scared, or at least I am, and I think that's the majority. If you're a horror fan, you want to be scared, or why else are you watching it? That's just my 2 cents. But I really enjoyed it, and I'm so glad that you mentioned it to me. And so, what other like you were talking for this younger generation, if you could recommend one well-known horror figure and then one more lesser known B movie, what would those 2 be that you would recommend the newer generation give a watch and check out?
Oof, that's a good question. Wow. Like a well-known horror figure. Well, obviously everybody knows Freddy. Obviously everybody knows Leatherface. Everybody knows Jason and Michael. And of course Pinhead. Wow, that's a really hard question, dude.
Yeah, well, it can be any of those, because
I would probably say, out of all those guys I just mentioned, I would probably say Pinhead. Not a lot of people are really into Hellraiser as you think that they might be. I think Hellraiser, out of all those slasher films that we grew up with, is probably one of the underrated ones. Everybody knows
I agree.
Michael, but I feel like he's really underrated. And so if you want to go with the slashers that we grew up with for these newbies, I would say probably just give Hellraiser a chance.
That
really
first
dark.
one.
It's a really dark film, and it's you know, in all honesty, watching it now as I'm older, it's like, it's very sexual in a way, too.
Oh, absolutely. It's in some freaky ways. But in the podcast I did, the last podcast I did, I don't know if you listened to that part or not, but
yeah.
Doug Bradley, who played Pinhead, I met him. He was the biggest asshole in the whole wide world.
I can't believe that.
I shit you not. And Doug, if you're listening, don't even try to deny this. We were in Worcester, Massachusetts, and it was the last day of the convention, and I shit you not, when he was getting ready to leave, he took off this button-up shirt that he had on, and underneath that shirt, he had on a shirt that said something to the effect of, you know, you met me, I got your money, fuck off, go home. And I'm like, what a piece of shit. Yeah, you know, I shit you not. One of my friends actually snapped a picture of it, and I will try to get that from her and post it here in the morgue. But when I went to, well, I'll put it to you this way. Let me reiterate on that. He was an asshole to every guy that went to meet him. But when my friend Michelle and my friend Sarah, when, you know, they were with me, when it was their turn to chat with him, you know, he was super fucking nice. But every guy, you know, so, you know, he definitely walks around, you know, thinking with his bottom half, as far as I can say. And so that's probably why Hellraiser was so sexual. But, okay, now so now that we've got that out of the way, and Doug will hate me forever now, but that's fine. So you recommended... You recommended Hellraiser.
I was probably Hellraiser, yeah. Okay. And B-movie wise, yeah, it's a hard one, dude. Like, I kind of want to go with Wishmaster.
Oh, I forgot about that one. That's a good one. That is a good one.
It's, yeah, I kind of want to go, it's like Wishmaster or The Stuff.
Yeah, The Stuff.
Lately, I don't know, The Stuff has been just popping up in my mind lately, and I haven't seen that movie in over 10 years. So it might be a time to kind of, like, revisit it. But The Stuff was just like, when I first saw it, I was like, really? What is... Anyway, but that's another story.
No,
but yeah,
that's fine. I think
either Wishmaster or The Stuff. So,
okay. Well, I think we need to come back later on and do another podcast about The Stuff. Because that movie, holy hell, you know, and there's so many good ones out there. You know, I'll tell you another one I watched a few weeks back, Chopping Mall. I hadn't seen that since I was a kid, and I went back and watched that. There's so many great, you know, B movies, and at that time, you know, Jason, Freddy, Michael, they were kings. And so all these
they were like the blockbusters.
They were, you know. I don't include Leatherface and Texas Chainsaw because it was just too much for people, you know. Because especially living in the South, we all know some crazy family that lives in the backwoods that God knows what the hell they're doing. And I'm not joking when I say that. We got some real nut jobs around here. And I apologize to any listeners from the South, but I can say it because I was born here and I live here, and there's some fucked up people. But you know,
it's all true, no?
Yeah, it's all true, you know. I hear banjos, you know, keep paddling, whatever it is. But, no, and another movie that you mentioned that I wanted to give a shout out to, and also kind of the urban legend, was Candyman. Tony Todd is one of the greatest actors. I love Tony Todd. He was amazing in the Night of the Living Dead remake, and he sure was awesome in Candyman. So that's going to be I'm going to call that a B movie because it didn't really get the recognition I think it deserved. And another one from Wes Craven is Shocker. Shocker is a freaking awesome movie.
Oh wow! And, I totally forgot about Shocker.
Yeah, so we've got enough, you know, material. Galaxia will definitely be back on the show, and we're gonna talk about some of these. We may just do an hour show and cram as many as possible.
I got a whole bunch of B movies to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Galaxia, I know it's late, hun. You guys are an hour ahead of us, so I'm gonna let you go, and I know you have work tomorrow, and I promised my daughter I would bring her back outside before bedtime so she could catch a couple of fireflies, and so that's my plan. But again, thank you so much for recommending
this was
the movie.
I feel honored that I actually recommended a movie you haven't watched yet.
It made my day. And everybody, guys, if you get a chance, go check out Rawhead Rex. You will not be disappointed. You're in for a good time, but go into it with an open mind and no expectations, like we said. And I think you're really gonna enjoy it. And
Awesome.
with that, Galaxia, thank you so much. Have a great night. And
anytime, brother. You too.
All right, thank you, hon. Goodbye.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
You too. All right, guys, that was Galaxia and myself finishing up episode 2 of the podcast, The Talk of Horror. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to get out and check out some B movies and, support your independent films, because they don't get enough credit. So this is Mike, thanking all of you for listening in to episode 2 of the Talk of Horror podcast, and we will see you soon.